Everything to know about ignition relay. There are a few steps you must take before you get in the car and turn on the motor. One of the most important, and frequently disregarded, parts of any car ignition system is the ignition relay. A small electrical component called the ignition relay is situated in a large current motor's starting circuit. A high current circuit's current is controlled by the relay, which is merely a remote control switch. The car's ignition relay closes the much more potent starting circuit with a modest amount of ignition switch electricity. What is an ignition relay? The ignition relay is essentially a piece of electrical equipment that switches power to your car's fuel system and ignition system. As soon as you turn the key in the ignition of your car, the ignition relay is put into action. The ignition relay then turns on the power and permits it to reach the systems that must be powered on for your vehicle to operate. As a result, the battery sends energy to the ignition coil, which in turn sends energy to the spark plugs in your car to start the engine. What are the functions of an ignition relay? The ignition relay serves as a circuit completer or circuit breaker between the vehicle's battery and the starter motor. By increasing the battery's current, less current must be ignited, which is beneficial. This is a switch between the start solenoid and the starter motor, per the description. A sizable current is produced when you turn the ignition key or depress the car's start button. The ignition switch cannot be adjusted, and the starter motor consumes a significant amount of current. The relay will burn out if there isn't one. The vehicle might not start if the ignition relay malfunctions. There are numerous possible causes for this component to malfunction, as we will discover later. Depending on the type and degree of the risk, they also need a variety of therapies. Some can be fixed, while others need new relays to be installed. What are the functions of an ignition relay? The ignition relay serves as a circuit completer or circuit breaker between the vehicle's battery and the starter motor. By increasing the battery's current, less current must be ignited, which is beneficial. This is a switch between the start solenoid and the starter motor, per the description. A sizable current is produced when you turn the ignition key or depress the car's start button. The ignition switch cannot be adjusted, and the starter motor consumes a significant amount of current. The relay will burn out if there isn't one. The vehicle might not start if the ignition relay malfunctions. There are numerous possible causes for this component to malfunction, as we will discover later. Depending on the type and degree of the risk, they also need a variety of therapies. Some can be fixed, while others need new relays to be installed. Where is the ignition relay located? Depending on the car's design and manufacturer, the precise location of the ignition relay may vary from one vehicle to the next. The fuse box under the hood is frequently where you'll find the ignition relay. It can also be found within the car, in a fuse box under the dashboard. You can use the repair handbook that the manufacturer of your car gave you to locate the ignition relay quickly and identify it correctly. Along with many other relays mounted on it, it will be found in the relay panel. What are the symptoms of a bad, failing ignition relay? Car ignition problem. Giving power to all of your car's control modules and sensors that are required for the engine to run is the ignition relay's main duty. When it fails to deliver any of these, then be certain that your ignition relay has a problem. There is a significant chance that the ignition relay is malfunctioning if nothing happens on your dashboard when you turn the key in the ignition lock and you are certain that the car battery is charged. These problems must be resolved right away. You'll have to travel without your car if you don't. Engine stalls. Power for crucial engine components like the fuel pump and ignition coils is provided by the ignition relay. You may probably predict what will happen if it can't supply electricity to them, because, without these parts, your engine will quickly shut down. Dead battery after night. In order to prevent the battery from being drained while you leave the car standing overnight, the ignition relay should also turn off power to all engine components when the ignition key is turned off. When the ignition relay malfunctions, The ignition system may continue to operate even after the keys have been withdrawn from the ignition. This implies that the circuit won't operate after the key is removed, and the battery will discharge. In light of this, the ignition relay may have been to blame for a battery that failed while operating flawlessly the day before. Fluctuating ignition power. There might be a problem with the ignition relay if your dashboard is blinking like a game of table flipping. When corrosion develops inside the ignition relay, problems can arise. As a result, the connecting space inside the relay may get too narrow, which would result in the ignition turning off and on very quickly. Bad electronic smell. Heat is produced by a poor electrical connection. A poor connection can form inside an ignition relay if it has corrosion, rust, or water, which can generate a lot of heat. Frequently, you may see that the plastic relay cover has melted. If you've ever smelled burnt electronics, you should check the ignition relay the next time you get that sensation. How do you test an ignition relay? Below are the materials and tools needed for a successful test: fully charged battery, baking soda, water, and wire brush. A portable jumper cable manufacturing technology. Safety glasses and gloves. Below are the steps involved in testing an ignition relay. Make sure the transmission is in neutral or the parked position and that the car is parked securely. You don't want the car to move forward unintentionally while you're working below it. A fully charged battery and a portable jumper should be ready before testing. Alternatively, you may make sure your car battery is fully charged and isn't the problem by checking it. Please pay close attention to how the jumper cable is connected to the battery terminal throughout the entire test. Examine the battery and ignition connection terminals. Make sure there is no dust, grease, rust, or debris on them. Remove the negative battery cable and place it aside before cleaning corroded terminals. The battery positive cable should be unplugged from the battery and laid aside. Make sure the cables don't unintentionally come into contact with the battery connections. The rusted terminals can be cleaned using baking soda, water, and a wire brush. Clean the starter terminal if necessary. Disconnect the battery cable if you can. It is important to follow the cable that runs from the ignition solenoid to the starting relay. On the relay, there are 4 terminals. 2 smaller wires from the crucial switching circuit are utilized to turn on the relay. The battery voltage is sent from the battery to the starter by 2 bigger cables. Mark the 2 smaller wires before removing the wires from the ignition relay so that they may be rejoined properly. Jumper wires are connected with one end to the chassis ground. The other end needs to be attached to terminal 86. Attach a jumper wire to the battery's positive terminal. The jumper can be connected for a brief period because the battery and ignition connection have been severed. The resistance between terminals 30 and 87 must be measured with a digital voltmeter. Its resistance needs to be under 1 ohm. The relay is inoperative if the resistance is higher than 1 ohm. It's necessary to swap out the relay. How much does an ignition relay replacement cost? Depending on the car's model and labor expenses, replacing an ignition relay typically costs between $15 and $100. Costs for labor and ignition relays range from $10 to $50. Depending on whether you want to purchase an OEM or aftermarket ignition relay, you might anticipate paying less than $10 for the relay itself. The replacement of the ignition relay is frequently also fairly simple. If you prefer a mechanic to handle it instead, you may anticipate paying between $15 and $100 for the replacement. If this video was helpful, please consider subscribing to this channel. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.